Over the last week, I've seen a lot of mixed reactions to the opening few episodes of this new series of Doctor Who, but one thing that's been pretty consistent, and that's the excitement over a new episode written by former showrunner Steven Moffat. With so much hope placed on the shoulders of one episode, could it ever live up to the hype, or are we just setting ourselves up for disappointment? In this video, which will contain spoilers, I'm going to talk about the reaction over the last week, the overnight viewing figures, and of course, my reaction to Boom, which I've just finished watching. Please, won't you join me beyond the sofa? Okay, so it's stupid o'clock on a Saturday morning again, and I've just watched Boom, and I think that this needs to be put into some sort of context. So I wanted to talk about the reaction to last week, as well as the overnights, because there's a lot of speculation about a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't know a lot about. So let's start with Space Babies and The Devil's Cord. There's been very mixed reactions to those episodes. I've watched them again since, and you know what? It was a better experience the second time around. I think maybe because I knew what I was getting into. Space Babies seemed to be the weaker of the two. But typically that's the same, with all Doctor Who openers. Certainly Partners in Crime or New Earth, they suffer from the same problems. And I'd question whether this was necessarily a good move for this series. You're trying to get a more global audience on board, and you open with something that is, well, let's just call it a bit of an acquired taste. Look, there's a reason why the shows stateside pour so much energy into the opening episode and the closing two episodes of a series. The closing episodes are as much to get the audience excited for next year as anything else, and the opening episodes need to fulfill the promise that the previous season closer made. We seem to have picked up the idea of the season finale in the UK, but not necessarily the importance of the opener. So whilst I don't hate Space Babies, I know some people did. And they weren't always the people that you might point to and say, yeah, but you're not a real Doctor Who fan. It was certainly on the weaker side of episodes if you look at New Who as a whole, and I can see viewers experiencing that and maybe not coming back to the series. The Devil's Cord, on the other hand, was a lot better, adjunct of me finding ways that I would want to improve it. It's a pretty solid episode. It's right up there until the song at the end. That song was the thing that divided the opinions most. Not because there was a song at all, but because it wasn't very good. And it did seem kind of tacked on at the end. And as someone who enjoys musical theatre and sort of revelled in musical episodes of Buffy, it pains me to see my favourite show kind of going through the motions. Now, it has been said that the idea of the end was that Maestro's influence was still there and that it was dissipating from the world. And there was even a comment that the shooting script mentions this somewhere or somehow. But here's the problem. If it doesn't actually say it in the episode, if all of this has come from some sort of meta-narrative to the show, something that most viewers might not even get a chance to see, that's not good program making. And it does kind of worry me going forward. I had hoped that we'd get away from that. How many other episodes will need some sort of deep dive into interviews across multiple sources to understand? Because again, that's not good program making. But for the most part, and ignoring that musical number, The Devil's Cord was much better received. Perhaps a little too close to the toy maker to make Maestro as scary a villain as I would have liked, but in general it works for me. Anyway, I've reviewed this already, so let's get on to the viewing figures. We are all in a little bit of an experiment at the moment. This is the first time that we've seen an episode drop on iPlayer before it was broadcast. Now, the BBC has done this with other series, but nothing quite as big as Doctor Who, so we're not entirely sure what we should be looking for here. As it was, the overnights showed around an average of 2.5 million people watching across both broadcasts. Some people are saying that that doesn't matter. Some people are saying that that's definitely the end for Doctor Who. I think the truth is possibly a little bit different. Firstly, pure viewing figures haven't been important to the BBC for some time. I'm talking a good decade or more. Producers that I know care much more about the audience share. So that's what percentage of television viewers watching at the time of the programme going out are watching your programme. Now, I've not seen those figures, so I can't draw any conclusions from them. And you have to subscribe to, I think it's Barb that collects them, to view those figures, and I just cannot afford to do that. The big takeaway from this should be that regardless of viewing figures, we don't really know enough about what they're tracking internally to show what is a success and what isn't. It could be that the only thing that matters is the viewing figures that Disney gets. We simply don't know. In the past, viewing figures were important because a cost-benefit analysis would have been done, and the BBC would have said, for the money that we're paying, is this programme valuable? What that value is might be determined by a lot of different things. For example, a programme like Inside Number 9, which is actually one of my favourite programmes on television at the moment, doesn't get the highest of ratings in terms of sort of viewership for comedy shows. But it's very good at getting awards. And having those awards, that gives the BBC a sort of prestige, and it's seen as more worthwhile to keep that show going at the budget that it's got, regardless of the viewing figures. That said, Inside Number 9 does get good viewing figures, just not as good as some other comedy shows that are made for maybe less money, but don't bring the corporation as much prestige. Typically then, when a show has low viewing figures, it's one of two things that's going to happen. Either you're going to reduce the budget of the show, or you'll cancel it outright. If the BBC think that there is a reason to keep a show going, they may just reduce the budget. Unfortunately, in a show like Doctor Who, reducing the budget can make a massive difference in the overall quality of the show. It could be the difference between a show that people engage with and one that they just don't buy into. I mean, look, we've already seen it drop to 8 episodes this season, for example. So whilst viewing figures are important, the main variable that we're completely unaware of is what the BBC are actually tracking to determine the show's success. So you'll notice I'm not saying whether the viewing figures are good or bad. I'm saying that I don't know, and that speculation at the moment is unhelpful. And I wanted to say that now because we are going to get an awful lot of this over the next few weeks. So if you haven't skipped to this point already, let's stop talking about viewing figures. Let's start talking about Boom. We open with a planet ravaged by war, where ambulances kill somebody because they've got what we would consider to be a fairly minor injury. The Doctor stumbles into this war, rushes in to try to save the day, and ends up stepping on a landmine. The rest of the episode pretty much is played out with him standing in one position, and that makes for a really interesting episode. There's something very insular about this whole story that actually allows Ncuti and Millie to shine in their respective acting roles. This is a far cry from Space Babies. It's also almost a portrait of the different characters. We get a much more muted performance from Ncuti, which is really welcomed because it shows his Doctor in a brand new light, and it brings back some of the gravitas that I think was probably missing from those first 2 episodes. Not that there wasn't elements of dark and light in Devil's Court, of course, but in Boom, there was a much better balance for each character in the dialogue, and I feel it really pushed the acting ability of both actors in a good way, of course. I didn't feel at any point that either of them were, out of their depth or anything.
I found the gap. It's right under your foot, in front of you.
How big is it?
4 fingers.
Okay.
I think this really was the episode that we've all been waiting for. It was the episode that we needed to really highlight how good this TARDIS team is. The timelines here seem to be a little bit all over the place. We start off at Christmas. Episode 2 is in June. Episode 3 is in October. And we're seeing Ruby experience her first alien planet. Has she really been travelling with the Doctor for that long? And they've never left the Earth? I mean, perhaps that's possible. John Pertwee never had a problem finding adventures on Earth, of course. It just does seem like such a long time, considering the Doctor mentions at the end of this episode how short Ruby's life is, and that how he wants to get on quickly and see new things. And if that holds true for the rest of the series, we're about to see a Doctor that is just not going to slow down at all. Now, let's talk about the writing, because dialogue-wise, this really was head and shoulders above what we've seen with the episodes so far. And I don't like having to say that, because I do think that Russell T Davies has proven that he could write really good episodes. I just don't think that we've seen him shine as much. And we should have done. We should have seen that in the first few episodes, over the first week. It just feels like this is a different level to what we've had recently. One of the things that really got me from the moment the Doctor stood on the landmine was that I was waiting with bated breath. I didn't even realise until, I suppose it was the moment that he put his foot back on the ground again, that there was a little bit of relief, and then there was that moment that I realised I'd barely been breathing. And that point, we were around about 15 minutes into the episode at that point, but I'd lost all sense of time. I had to go back and check when it was. I was just focused on what was going on screen. And in television, television that can make you do that, in this day and age, that is quite remarkable. There's always that pull to go back to, your device, to check Twitter once in a while, or to see if a friend has posted on Instagram or on Facebook. I didn't even consider looking through the whole episode. I actually, when I do these things, I set my iPad up to make notes so that I can remember what I want to say in these videos. And I didn't make a single note. I was so involved in the story. We also get a really lovely moment for Ruby here as well. There's a scene where she's putting her foot down and doing that thing that companions always do, ignoring the Doctor for the greater good. She has saved the Doctor's life, and that's something that we want to see our companions doing. Actually, something that kind of did go through my mind was watching this. I think that Ruby and the Doctor are very much like the Third Doctor and Joe. They've got a really similar dynamic in there, which seems to come to the fore in this story. But I did notice similarities in The Devil's Cord and Space Baby as well. And it'll be interesting to see if that actually plays out in other episodes of the series. And just when you think that you've got a moment to breathe, the military comes storming in and it all goes to hell again. Monday is played by Varadna Sithu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She, of course, is going to be the new companion as well. So I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce that correctly. I don't know if this has got anything to do with her appearing there, but I'm sure that this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to talk about in the coming week. Actually, she was very good here, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of her when she becomes an official companion. The themes of this are, well, they're nothing to write home about, let's face it. It's war. The Doctor doesn't like war, so he says that he doesn't like war. And more than that, it's war which has been bought and fought with weapons that have been purchased. And that's some comment on capitalism. It's fine, but it's nothing that we haven't seen before in one way, shape or form on Doctor Who. Something that I think is interesting, though, is that it doesn't directly relate to anything that's going on politically at the moment. It's very sort of broad strokes of a theme. And that tends to work better with programs like Doctor Who. You could liken it to certain things in the media at the moment, but it doesn't... I don't think that's going to be something that you'll go back on and you go, well, actually, that was a bit clunky, because I don't think it was. But now we come on to the bits of the episode that I didn't like as much, and that has to be the ending, unfortunately. This show has this little bit of a Deus Ex Machina moment, or I suppose we should call it Ghost in the Machine rather than God in the Machine. And I did feel like the introduction of the AI as the solution to the problem did take some of the agency away from the Doctor as the person who should be solving the problem. It's a little too convenient that a bog-standard AI is capable of destroying military-grade algorithms. It's a little bit too convenient that the power of being a parent is the thing that saves the day. Although I quite like the sentiment behind that. I like that Ruby gets shot. I like that the Doctor has to face the possible death of a companion, something that has always been a really big trauma to the Doctor, right at the point where he doesn't want to have any emotion at all. What I'm not so keen on is the Doctor passing on problem solving to someone or something else within the narrative. I suppose after 40 minutes of seeing the Doctor stood in one place, unable to move, I want him to be the person that solves the problem. The whole idea of AI being able to pass through the Doctor's body into the ambulance, that didn't really sit well with me either. Although I thought the introduction of the bomb and how much damage the Doctor specifically could do if he is the catalyst for this explosion was really smart. It did convey a real sense of urgency, especially with that countdown timer. Of course, that does mean we have an arbitrary countdown, something which Steven Moffat episodes have often been criticised for in the past. To be honest, I didn't mind that much. I mean, it added a little bit of urgency to what was going on, and it worked for me. And overall then, despite the few problems that exist within the, well, let's call it the broader narrative, this is a really strong episode of Doctor Who, and one that I think is going to become a fan favourite for the series. It's certainly well above what we've already been seeing, and it's giving some of the 60th specials a run for their money as well. The best part about this episode is seeing Ncuti and Millie really come into their own as actors and really own that screen and have that stage presence that you want to have with the Doctor and their companion. It was about time that we got an episode that was this good. And I'm kind of happy that it was Steven Moffat who was the person who delivered it to it, mostly because his writing has always been very strong in previous series, and I didn't really want that to end. That's what I think. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I would absolutely love to have you join me next time we go Beyond the Sofa.